Hello, Katrina, and hello, everyone who's going to watch this. Yes, first of all, welcome to Freedom Dance Psychology. I want to call it this series. Now, I got interested in what is actually happening to us when we dance, when we practice from the psychological point of view. And I have Caitríona Nic Ghiollaphádraig with me today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Alex. Delighted to be here.
I'll probably leave some room for you to introduce yourself, but I want to share a story just to give people a flavor how we meet with wonderful people when we are engaged in something like dance meditation or conscious movement. We were in the same training module of open floor, and a few colleagues of mine it got me involved in a game where we would give each other a limitation for our warm-up dance. And I was lucky enough to get the following instruction: when you meet someone in the dance, stay with them until they go away from you rather than leaving them. So Katrina was injured at that time or recovering, so she was staying still, and our eyes met, so I knew there was no escape. She was my partner, and I and that was the
Oh,
deepest. I don't know, like there was so much, a lot of human stuff in that long dance that we had, and a huge lesson of how much we can discover in each other if we just allow ourselves to stay with each other long enough. So thank you. I would like to start with thanking you for that beautiful extended dance that we had and that connection.
thank you, Alex. Yeah, I remember that, and I was so impressed by that you were staying with me because I could do so little. I was going, oh my God, I didn't know you were instructed, as in that it would have been for me to leave because it would have been impossible. We'd have been there for the rest of our lives at that time. So yeah, it was very, very interesting and and then because you were staying, it made it so much easier for me then just to be rather than expecting, oh, they're going to leave because I can't actually go on, I can't be the person leaving, which is also different for me
Yeah.
in myself too, in my dance.
I also remember that in the same training, you were not just a dancer on the dance floor, but you were also presented a piece of your research or a summary of your research on the brain activity and the neuroscience as it relates to what we do. I was searching through my computer for that presentation, but with all the travels, I don't know, I couldn't find it. So this is my chance to maybe get a revision of some of that, but also maybe some new information, some new insights. And yeah, I would like, so basically, what's happening with us from the point of view of the modern science, so and as it relates to our dance practice as a mindfulness practice, and then maybe later on we'll talk about specifically working with emotions and your take on that one. But before we dive into the content, maybe you could just tell us a few words about your background, and both in the movement world, but also in, how did you get involved with all this advanced stuff and neuroscience?
Yeah, originally, actually, I'm a trained home economics teacher in Ireland. So I taught what we call second level. I taught teenagers for a few years, and then I took a year off actually, but I never ended up going back because life took me off in a completely different direction, and I started to actually work with adults and do community work. Then I trained in community work. I trained in organizational development, and I trained in analytics, basics, analytical psychotherapy. And then I had the opportunity to join an organisation where I was going to be a trainer of people in community development here in Ireland, managers, organisers of um, um, kind of community projects that were working with people who were disadvantaged in Ireland. And but just prior to that, the organisation I was in, one of the people in it got an invitation from the Tavistock Institute to see if anybody would like to go on this new kind of like really radically for the Tavistock creative course. Any women, it was actually called Women's Work, Wisdom, Balance and Influence. And the Dave was the man who got it, and he said to me, he knew I had done a lot of work with women in work and training and community work. So he said to me, "Would you like to go on it?" And I looked at it and I thought, "Oh my God, that'd be fabulous to go on," but could not afford it. But there was a training budget in our organisation, of which I was handed the training budget, and off I went to England. My first trip actually to England, and there Dilys, whom you will know, Dilys Morgan Scott, was part of the team who were doing this work. So it was looking at women's lives from every aspect possible. But they had this thing called the 5 rhythms, which we did every day. And I thought I had died and gone to what only I could call heaven. I had always loved dancing, but I kind of was getting, I was in my I was just in my late 20s, and I kind of thought, oh, well, my days are over, and I'm going to be dancing at weddings from now on. And in my next life, I used to watch, films of Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and all the dancers. And I think in my next life, I'll be a real dancer. But this happened, and I thought, oh, this is amazing. So I really fell in love with it. And then when I returned back to the organization after a week, now just a week, they asked me, I had to give a report because obviously they'd paid for it as to what I had done. So from somewhere inside me, in the middle of our staff meeting, I just said then, well, okay, if everybody stands up. And I taught what we now know in 5 rhythms as my first body parts class. And they all looked at me and said, "We paid for you to go and do that?" I said, well, amongst other things, and that. But at the end of the meeting, everybody kind of commented, "Oh, God, I really enjoyed that meeting. It was really good. And I don't feel worn out and that." So I kind of, said, well, what was different? And then everybody said, "Oh, the stuff you did." So we started to start our meetings with that kind of thing. And then here in Ireland, our organisation and 2 others got really big money from the EU to run big training courses in community development throughout the country. And for some reason, my the management group and my organisation asked me, well, could we introduce movement into it?
Right.
So the agreement was then I would go back and forth with Susanna Yakov at the time and do weekends, do week-long courses, do whatever they were offering. I would go and do that to gain more experience because I wasn't sure. So I wrote to Gabrielle Roth at the time, and I said, "This is what I've been asked." And she said, said, "Fire ahead." I've never heard anybody do anything like this before, and so I translated all our theory of community development, of organizational change, and everything like that into movement. And it's like the naivety of somebody who's young and kind of into it. I could never imagine doing it again, but we did it for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then people kept saying, "Gosh, we can't all come on these courses, these social and political courses, just to do movement. Can you do it separate?" So that's when I applied for the training in 1997. I said no, I'm not going to So I got accepted in the training in the 5 rhythms, and like as I said, the rest is history. I started then teaching, and then I taught. I've been teaching since '97, like in workshops and that, and then I trained also on the open floor. Then when that came on, and I suppose, Alex, I've always had a really curiosity. Always, I'm a really curious person by nature, and I began to kind of found the word dance, a tricky word to use when I was teaching early on, because so many people expected me to teach them to waltz or to tango or to do this particular Irish dancing kind of steps,
Yeah.
all of which I had no ability to teach anybody anything like that. So I then started to use movement, the word movement rather than dance. And then I began to think this is not just like going to a disco. There's something more, and this was mindful. So I then began to research and look into the whole area of mindfulness, and thought, this this is this is only we're doing this like actively, like in movement. And then huge amount of I began then to get very interested in neuroscience. I was on a course with Andrea Ewan, a year-long course she did, and she introduced the book, The General Theory of Love, and I read it and I was absolutely blown away by it, the way that they had linked love and neuroscience and the brain. I'd never, I mean, even though I had studied anatomy, I had never studied the brain, in any kind of detail other than that was sitting inside your head. So I got very interested, and as one of the only English for English speakers on the course, and most people find the book quite hard to read. Andrea said to me, would I translate it and bring back a synopsis? So then I had to go and study the book, plus study extra. So that really pushed me into the whole area of neuroscience, and it was like opening up a Pandora's box. It was fabulous, and or an Aladdin's cave, I should say. So I began then to find like people like Daniel Siegel and Stephen Porges and Kelly McGonigal and numerous others, and then took myself really into deciding to study as much as I could. Both on, I was online. I did online courses with them. Then I read any books I could lay my hands on. And the more I studied it in the area of mindfulness, the more I could see this is what I'm actually seeing on the dance floor. It's not just in sitting practice, but I actually see it in movement. And it coincided with me having a brain injury. I had a very serious bike accident where I ended up with a brain injury, and I lost for good part of a year the use of my left leg, and then I lost sensation. So I had to then. It was like I was studying the brain, and suddenly I had an experience of what they were talking about. Um, so I was absolutely fascinated by this, and began to notice my own movement and then what was happening, and then to realize so much of what was happening was going on inside my brain, as distinct from um, it was the brain trying to mend itself. And I I then really was fascinated by that. So then I began to put it together and go, so that's affecting my movement, and that's affecting the way I'm thinking and feeling and all that. So that just spurred me on more and more and more to delve into it. And then I fortunately or unfortunately, had two more serious accidents, just to confirm everything. And then finally, I asked myself the question: Okay, Caitríona, it doesn't look as if you're going to die at the moment because these accidents. So, what would you really like to do? And I thought, God, I'd love to introduce the neuroscience into the dance. I'd love to take that risk of bringing the neuroscience, the information to the dance, what I was teaching. And so I did. People began to get lectures in neuroscience as to what was actually happening in their body and on the brain. And then we would do the movement. And it changed completely my teaching, changed completely my work, my whole sort of way of introducing the movement. And for me, it just allowed the movement workshops to be more vibrant and more alive and more real. In people began to see that this was actually they were changing their brains. They were by changing the way they were moving. And they were changing their minds, and they were making it very visible to themselves what was going on. And one of the biggest things I noticed is people began to understand the way the brain is like meaning making and habit making, and that a lot of the way they were was not their fault. It was more in a response to a certain time that had got repeated, and the brain loves repetition. So they began to say, so I could think, and the fact that plasticity is a very core um, information that's been found out now because of the way I've been able to look at the brain, and that we're not fixed. It was the idea we're not fixed human beings, that we actually always, till the day we're going to die, we have the opportunity to make a change or make a shift. And so I brought that in, and that became its core to all my teaching now. And then I went on and developed a 2-year program called Embodied Brain, Embodied Presence, where people bring some particular way of being a part, like a part of themselves that they've kind of tried to work with, or maybe have even brought to therapy, talk therapy, or that, and it hasn't fully shifted, and they bring it, and we go through the processes of how it started, and then neurologically, and then the movement, and then we bring in, we take the length of time so that they actually get to make a new neurological pathway rather than trying to change the old one, to let that be and to create a new one. So um, that's my work now, and I'm constantly doing updating and reading more and bringing more information in and updating that course. So what for me was going to be a once-off, just to that I was going to really, just do before I died, this fantasy of dying early, um, has turned into 8 courses. So I'm on my 8th in March, and it's I personally love it, and I think it's just a fabulous mix to have, and particularly to have the movement um, to combine. So it's very practical, and I think that goes back to my background as a home economics teacher. I'm practical, very hands-on, practical, so that people get tools, and it is a practical. It's kind of a practical embodiment of really understanding the way our brain works as best I can translate it, and as best I can give the information and keep updating it. So that's kind of where it's
Oh,
come from with me.
it's fascinating. Thank you for telling. I didn't know all this story. All I got is a picture, a memory of you standing and presenting those slides on the brain,
Mm.
which I very often I can't follow, because I'm quite a big picture person rather than going into details. Although they say with age I should explore this other end of the polarity. I'm getting there, and that's what I'm talking to you. Um, well, I was extremely curious to hear about your specific, um, this this approach that you can actually, with repetition, you can create a new neural pathway or neural pathways to maybe introduce a new pattern. Maybe would you be able to give an example what it would be like, the old and the new, and how you would achieve, out of the whole repertoire, maybe something comes to you at the moment?
Yeah, I suppose the one that kind of springs to mind as you ask me that question, which I suppose I've grappled with myself and a lot of people that I would teach grapple with, just not being good enough.
All right.
And so what we would do is we would kind of name that sense of not being good enough, and then because we have the movement at the first half of the course as such, what we do is begin to find, well, how am I shaped? If I was to make that visible, if I was to take it out of just thinking cognitively about it, how does it shape me? So we get to know, kind of looking down, and maybe for me it's a lot of hand wringing, and then it's like listening to the soundtrack that goes with it, because it's usually quite repetitive, the
Mhm,
soundtrack, well, you're not
mhm.
good enough, that wasn't good enough, and you should have worked harder there, and you should be doing this
Very.
differently, and that kind of, and it's very rarely different, it's always that kind of, when we begin to listen to it, it's like, oh my goodness, it's the same old soundtrack. So we begin to put the two of them together and realize, oh, so this is how I'm shaped. And then uh, we really recognize that, and then we take it to finding out the age of it. We're like, what age am I when I'm actually operating like this?
Wow.
And I'm not the age I am today, standing, whatever age I am, standing in front of a group or in a session. I am usually much younger. So we track back that, we take that, and then we look at that when it began, and we then begin to see it as to how it was a response to something that occurred, that was like a very good survival strategy at that particular time in our lives. So what we do is we try to honor it rather than that. Oh God, I'm an awful person for feeling like that. We really try to lift that and kind of honor that part of, gosh, this was an amazing survival strategy. And does it serve you now? That's the question. Does it actually serve you now? So, if it's 3 years of age or 5 years of age or, 12 years of age, is it actually serving you now? And it's a bit like I've said to people, like, it's like a map, of you know, if you're driving around nowadays, updating your sat nav
Right.
or your map because maybe the road that you knew before is kind of blocked off, or, maybe there's a whole new road that you can get somewhere. And so I talk like that, and particularly about tracks, and say that, well, what we did is we laid down that pattern, and then we kept repeating it. So it's become, like mindless. We don't actually even we're in it before sometimes we even notice it's happening. So what we're trying to do all the time is bring that mindfulness to it, to bring more awareness of what are there any kind of the triggers that set it off, and then particularly because we're embodiment teachers, is there, it's like noticing, oh gosh, my head automatically goes down, so I'm actually
Right.
talking to the floor or the desk or whatever. um so it's like that's kind of noticing that. um and then what we do is that we're going to then try and create a more up-to-date map. We're not going to go back to being that age, because that's an impossible
Right.
feat. We're going to go, okay, thank you, to really extend, which is often tricky, a huge sense of gratitude to that younger part, um, and say, look, I'm much older. And then tell the part, then we actually tell the part what age we are, which is really surprising. It's like, you're what? It's like, you couldn't be that age. You're still only, I think you're only the same age I am. I'm 3, or, that kind of quirky way our brain works. And then you say, look, I'm going to actually take over. I So for example, for me, it's like I don't send my 3-year-old out to teach a workshop anymore. I find something else for the 3-year-old to do while I go out to teach the workshops. So we look at that. We then begin the transition to creating a new pathway. So what we do is we go, well, what, first of all, like, physically, what might be different? So what's it like if I actually brought my head up, and if I actually looked around? I notice I can't use the same words, I can't use the same sentences, the same soundtrack doesn't go with my head up as it does with my head down, for example. So I listen in and I go, oh, I didn't notice that over there, or I didn't see that, or oh, I didn't hear that. Oh, I never heard you saying that before. Eh, So we begin to look at new ways of moving. And in the new ways of moving, we're creating new habitual pathways. And then what we do is we try to bed that in and, find the repetition, so that then we're in the territory of choice. I am no longer like mindlessly falling into the I'm not good enough hole. I can actually come out, I can pull myself back quicker. I can ground, and then we do the grounding, the centering, all of that. And then we do all of that and then find the new, and learn to live with initially awkward, that it can be incredibly awkward and odd to, even in the safety of our workshops, to be going around the room with your head up in this place and going, I think I do that well. I think I do that well. I experiment. So we spend a lot of time experimenting in the kind of the transition phase,
Wow.
and then we begin to kind of just commit to practicing and practicing, even, walking around at home, in our supermarkets, in engaging with people we trust in this, so that we kind of bed it down and it becomes much more habitual to actually walk the other track rather than the old track. But knowing the old track will have a resonance, maybe when we get stressed or something happens, it comes up, but we're quicker able to catch it and go, oh no, that's my 3-year-old. It's probably feeling very nervous. Hold on a second. Let's pause. Let me just, bring my care and concern to that part of myself, and find my way back up to going, no, we'll steady up here.
Wow. This is fascinating.
Mm,
It's
it is.
and it's yeah. I looked at your calendar and I saw it said whatever the name is, 8, and I thought, is it 8 weeks or something? But now I know that it's the eighth time you're running it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
obviously people find it compelling, or like it's working.
Mm, mm. I'm very fascinated, and I suppose, Alex, because I think we're lucky in that because we have an embodiment practice, you can see the physical change. Like I can physically see people look different at and it's because it's almost 2 years of a course, so it's a big commitment. So I can physically see people as they, come into the room, as they engage with one another. Um, so even though they'll tell me, like there's a lot of feedback, and we have like reflective processes built into the course as well, and they'll tell us how we're going. But it's interesting just to see how people can look really different.
Do you do you dance in that group, or is it kind of more of, if it's kind of really sort of slow motion introspective movement as opposed to kind of dance to the music and
Oh no, oh no, loads of dance. Like we do plenty of warm ups for people to have that opportunity, but no, we would do like there's exercises where we slow everything down so you can think, but you then like move around and you'd engage in part. How do I engage as a partner if I'm feeling like this? Where the partner only sees. So we do all
this
that kind of
is
stuff.
the reason why I was asking, is checking rather,
Mm.
is that there are all sorts of people come to our workshops, and sometimes someone goes on another, somewhere on a course which is transformational. So there is some sort of euphoria. They say, yeah, I'm transformed now. I got so many insights. And then I look and the dance is the same.
Mm. Mm.
And if someone changes, their dance becomes different. Do you see
Yeah,
it not kind of in the dance as well?
yeah, yeah,
Like you were just
yeah.
saying, actually, like no
Exactly.
more talking
Yeah,
to.
yeah, and that's why I say to the people who come, and that's why people have to have some experience of mindful movement in order to come on the course, because I say that to people that you know this will be visibly different. Your body will feel visibly different. The dance will be different in module 8 than it is in module 1. I mean, personally, I'd love to have it I mean, I would never do it, but I've said it to groups, I'd love to have a camera in the room, hidden camera, and then at the end go, now look how you were, and now look. But because we do also mirroring work, you would take up my movements, I can get an opportunity to see the old one and the new one and kind of go, oh yeah, no, that's right, or oh yeah, yeah, God, I noticed that. Going around with my head up, I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things, and people are giving me feedback that I'm actually moving differently. So, oh yeah, it's very, very important. Like you couldn't come on the course now and do a theoretical course with me. It has the practical side too.
So what I'm hearing is that the importance of repetition and the practice, which
Yeah,
is also true about sitting mindfulness, whatever mindfulness, like
yeah,
it's a practice,
yeah.
and there is a formal practice which happens in your workshop, and there is informal where you go around trying to create, whatever we give attention to grows, right? So
Mm,
if you're
mm,
paving a new
mm,
pathway, then you need to work
yeah,
for it.
yeah,
Kind of
yeah,
makes sense, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. It's like yeah, because I often say to people, like I live in rural Ireland, so like I can often see tracks that the mountains that were laid down by sheep over, because I mean, basically, when you see a sheep stamp, they're not going to make a big impact once, but the years of just walking over and over and over have laid that track down. Now, if they take another track up, they'll do the same, but they need to repeat it. And I often ask people to go out if they've a lawn, if they've grass at all anywhere, or the beach, to go and keep walking over and over and over on the same piece for a piece and notice. Oh my goodness, the grass is like, if it's grass, the grass is like it's it's bent down there because I've gone over and over and over it, just to see, that actually does shift. But I do also say to people, this is work, and I think for adults, repetition is always tricky don't know if you find that in your work, but it's like when you said there, but I go on something and I'm transformed. I say to people, we're only halfway through the course, by the way. If you're feeling transformed, we're only halfway there. We are still the same. Like, the other side. It's like going up the mountain, but we're now going to come down the mountain. You know, and it's like, and we're going to keep repeating over and over this new way of being, so that it gets very ordinary and solid and steady, and it's not anything up and out. It's actually in.
I
But
would see I would see there would be a temptation to say, "Oh, I've got it. Now I need
mm,
to do that," but never practice, right? So
yeah, yeah,
that's the tricky bit. Now I'm speaking as a teacher more as a like how would you how would you actually sustain that practice beyond that insights? The insight comes, then you may lose interest or motivation. So do you like what's your approach to this? How you sustain this coming back and cultivating and uh, reinforcing?
well, we do that because the change happens midway in the course, not at the end. We don't finish with the change. It's midway. So the other half of the course is about cultivating it, creating it, repeating it, and then they have the group is broken up into support groups. So you'd have your little support
Right.
group that meet outside the modules, and you keep reporting back how you're going, how you're doing, what you're noticing, any shifts, any changes, that occur, so that and then you're supported by people if you kind of go, well, I didn't really do anything that's okay. Now can you start again tomorrow, and what might you do? So that's built into the course as well.
Well, very practical. And I just
Yeah.
want to, before we move on to something else, I just wanted to reflect on another thing. I remember when we were sitting in a circle at a teacher gathering when ICMTA, our professional association, was kind of born or was being born. It's an International Conscious Movement Teachers Association. I remember your words saying, well, I don't particularly need love from a professional body. Just give me respect and kind of it's
I know. I've had that. I have had that long
like
term.
give
Yeah,
me
yeah, 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 yeah.
so
I've always found love tricky.
so I trust that your courses are probably the same, kind of give me the meat, I'll deal with the with the rest of it. So,
Yeah, yeah, and actually on the course they do get one module on one of the modules is on like positivity and the role of positivity and the role of love, and I've loved that. I love that I discovered that according to some of the research around love needs safety to emerge. So I kind of go, oh, I wasn't quite off the wall when I was at places where I didn't know people or I didn't know everybody or I didn't, have that inner felt sense of safety in a way. Not that there was anything like happen, but just internally to
yeah,
go, I can't actually say that outright until I actually, and now I know why I can articulate. I don't actually feel safe enough. I don't know. I'm somebody who needs to know people a bit. Um, and to feel that. And I love that even within the work of Stephen Porges, the polyvagal theory, that kind of sense of safety is
yeah,
important for us to, grow and explore and feel that kind of genuine love, not some sort of, to me, fluffy stuff that doesn't go anywhere. So that's why back that I had to just start and then I was going, no, please don't do this to me. Don't do this to me.
yeah.
Mm,
Another thing that I saw on your website that you list your offerings, you say mindfulness practices, and then kind of there is a drop down menu, and of course there is five rhythms, an open floor, and something else kind of that is more less dancey, I would say.
mm,
So this question is almost irrelevant that I thought I was going to ask you, kind of can dance be a mindfulness practice? You sort of answered it through your work and how you position your dance-based uh, practices. But just to reconfirm, do you think it works similarly in terms of the brain, or are there differences you think when we practice mindfulness statically in sitting or however, or when we move and engage in something, well, that most people would describe as, people are just dancing, maybe.
Yeah, no, for me, the dance is absolutely incredible. Is my mindful practice. It is for me the mindful practice. And I know I did train in mindful self compassion, which was a sitting practice. And I did say to Chris Garmer and Christian Neff that I did want to use it in a movement way as part of my movement practice. So yeah, I mean, I understand the kind of the place for sitting meditation and pausing and really quieting down. So for me, there is that part of the dance which is still, and if I go back to the five rhythms, even it's the stillness or an open floor, it's the settling space. So that we're not caught up in a treadmill of activity, but how I can actually still myself, how I can quieten down, how I can settle down and settle in. So that has a place for me as well. Um, and at the same time, I do love. I have engaged quite a lot with the work of Richie Davison in the Centre for Healthy Minds, and they talk about active meditation and more the sitting. So I would see that we would come under in the dance practice, to use dance as the word even, under the active
Yeah.
meditation. So for me, again, it's a lot about attention, and we've used that word a few times here. Like, as far as I'm concerned, attention is like gold dust. And so where we put it and how we, so when we're moving, it's like, where's my attention? Am I moving just automatic? And for many of us, we're old enough, as you get older, to have automatic movements. We can drive cars automatic, without even knowing, oh my goodness, where did that town go? Or where was that turning? Or, you get up on a bike and you just cycle off, you do your dishes and you just do, you get up and you live your whole day, and never once were you really present. So for me, the work is about, I can be present in any activity I'm doing. Um, and I'm not making that a heavy practice, but just in a kind of an interesting attention practice sometimes. Where is my attention? And is that actually where I want to put the most valuable resource that we own as human beings? And I do spend my time now saying, we give our attention away like snuff it awake, and the social media organizations know that, and they're making billions on our attention, and we're acting as if it was like nothing, where it's like gold dust. So I bring that back and I go, what are you doing with your gold dust? You just, and how would you like to use it? And I think that's in movement. It's vital, otherwise we're on automatic pilot. And sometimes it's like, say, okay, now, just notice you're on that automatic pilot, and that's fine. This is a day when, someone
But,
takes up the
but
bike and wherever it goes, I'll go.
that reminds me what I do sometimes when I move and I catch myself thinking about something. And and sometimes I say, oh, I should really be putting my attention in more. But I said, but that was an interesting idea. It's a new workshop is being born right now.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll keep thinking while letting my body move on autopilot.
Yeah. And what
So,
I often do then is I say, okay, well, if you added the body into the thinking, how would it get clearer? Oh my God, and I can feel the workshop, it's like, that's how I get them to do, that's how I get them to do this. And oh yeah. So that's for me how then I would bring it into,
right,
to support the thoughts. Because otherwise then sometimes I have great ideas, and when I bring it down to the body, it goes, we're going nowhere with this, Caitríona. This
right,
is just going, just have that fantasy. Well, that's great, but we're not going anywhere with it.
right. Kind
Um,
of testing, using it as a test
hmm,
for ideas. Very interesting.
yeah. It comes back to my background. Like, if I was if somebody wanted to sew something, make something fabulous, and they showed me that, they go, I'd love that. And you look and you go, okay, have you ever sewed before? Have you ever done any sewing before? And they're going, no, never. I'm like, well, I mightn't start there now. Might start somewhere else. Let's maybe start, something a little bit more simple, and then we'll go there. We'll advance to that. And then they might come to the time and they go to me, I don't want to make that. I'm not interested anymore. I'm really very more interested in this. So that is, my background is just utterly practical. So I can be, I often think that's a bit dull, but it is practical. So that's how I look at things.
Great. So we talked about movement or dance. We talked about how the brain works and the mind and the attention as this property of our mind, like gold dust. Um, shall we talk about the heart and emotions then? I mean,
Hmm.
we touched upon that, but that really fascinates me when there are therapists. There is therapy where people work with emotions. They are trained to do that. There is a particular protocol. Maybe there's a code of ethics. There are emotions when we dance. In any case, that's no one disputes that. So it's kind of. But what happens is movement facilitators, or dance facilitators. We want to focus on this aspect of our being. Is there space for it? And how do you see that? Whether there is use of bringing in, specifically zooming in on emotions through our dance practice in our workshops. Yeah, whether it's useful, whether it's safe, anything really that you can comment on.
Oh, I mean, absolutely, because I think we are living, breathing, emotional beings. We have an emotional brain. We actually have a very emotional brain, and as you said, it's always there. And I sometimes think that when we bring the mindfulness, into our movement, more consciousness, we will become aware of feelings and that. So for me, I'm always trying to create, enough safety, a container that is safe enough that I can begin to allow myself to bring them out a little more, to find, well, what's the physical expression of this emotion. Um, because I do think, like if we're fearful, we have an echo in our body. We have particular movements and ways of, like looking around, even kind of a bit agitated, or as kind of, frozen, or or want to run away. So the body, we know that from all the science and all of the emotion science, like fight, flight, or freeze has a physical component. Um, and then if we're sad, I mean, tears, they come, out of our eyes, which is part of our body, down our face, and how we, and our heart gets heavy, and what that embodiment of that is, or if we're angry, like sometimes we make fists or something, or we get tense and get tight, or our mouths, even if we're trying to contain it, maybe the way we speak is a bit, tighter, or so bringing awareness of that, and then when joy enters, it's like that kind of the big breath that can kind of come, and like, oh my goodness, like or the laugh. We don't, like, for me, we're never. I have a belief that we're never disembodied. What I do think is we're often not aware. We it's like we're just not quite. We're having the awareness isn't there, but like if we laugh, it doesn't, like, we don't laugh somewhere out there. We laugh here. If we cry, the tears come out of the eyes we possess. Um, if we're fearful and we got hot, it's kind of sweaty and anxious. It's our physical body that gives us these signs and sensations. Um, but sometimes we don't know what it is, or we're afraid of them. We can be kind of fearful of them. We just want to kind of push them away, or disconnect from them, or dissociate from them. But my sense is that we're always embodied, but we're not always aware we are. And for me, for my life practice is bringing more and more awareness to the fact that this body and this mind and this heart and this spirit and this brain all work completely interconnected with one another, even if we're not always aware of their interconnections, or we have kind of gone off in a different, maybe, kind of try to disconnect. They're still there, like until the day we die and completely die, we will have this body, even if we're, harming it, or if we're kind of, doing things we don't like it. But it's still around until that day comes. So how we can come more to see it as something that you know, could actually support us to live a vibrant life, not necessarily kind of happy, that kind of way, but a vibrant, livable life that has capacity to feel fear, feel anger, feel sadness, feel joy, feel disgust, feel all the myriad of emotions, that are there. Um, in that kind of sense of, I often say in my workshops that I often think the Western world particularly brings us, like, as if as we're getting older, like we're kind of shrinking into something smaller. Whereas I actually see it, we go the opposite. We're born, with a certain amount, but we're actually expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding until someday, like, we go, poof, we do expire. But it's that sense of, as we get older, this wide range of experience, this wide range of capacity to feel more, even to have maybe hopefully a bigger heart rather than a tighter heart. And because life will throw everything at us as we get older. There's no way of avoiding that, I think, for anybody. And it's how we use our emotions not to close down and harden up and disconnect, but to actually allow it to protect it, but to actually feel that it beats with vibrancy as I get older and older and older and older. Um, in life, and I really believe that I really do believe that there's we can get old vibrantly rather than decrepitly, which I think, and particularly I think these days with a lot of stuff that COVID brought up for so many older people, it was like almost, well, you're on your way out, so bye bye, as distinct from, hold on a second, all the generations have lots to bring a vibrancy to living this thing called life.
Mm. So what's your, when you're working with emotions, so bringing that in, how do you do that? Do you allow them to come through kind of and then name them, or it's a particular emotional state that you're working with? What's your approach to this whole area of how much kind of leading is needed or safe or justified in this area?
Kind of do both,
Mhm.
depending on the workshop. Um, and like I do in all workshops, try to begin now with the sense of building safety. Um, and so that our nervous system is safe enough to allow out the expression. Because I think it's hard to explore when we're not safe. You know, it's, we're like battling against our nervous system. So, and it's not an artificial thing, but it's allowing just that kind of sense of, uh, safe enough. Nothing's ever, perfectly safe. We're in this thing called life. It's not perfectly safe, but safe enough to allow. So some workshops for that. So then it's like, well, what are you noticing
Yeah,
today? What are you noticing? And then bit by bit, bring it out that way. And how might we
yeah,
express it? And you know, how does it shape you? How does it? Is it familiar? Is it? You know, is there a spectrum of it? Whatever. And other times, then I might actually deliberately say, we're going to look at anger today, or we're going to look at joy. Particularly, it's interesting. I don't know about you, but I have found over the years that, we often think, well, anger, oh my God, it could be a tough workshop. I have found joy the hardest workshop in the world. It's like there's something. It's like the minute you say we'll head towards joy, every scrap of fear and anger and sadness appears on the spot. You're going, okay, so we have to welcome all these in first. Oh, poor old joy, and but it's something about it, and I know it's light, I know it's airy, I know it never stays. It's so fleeting and so light. I think that we don't trust it or something, and we let it pass on, and we miss it. Um, so I love teaching that one because it's such a challenge. Um, I think anyway.
I can imagine.
So that's the way I do it. It's like both. One is the allowance of how is it for you now, what's happening, how will we allow this to emerge, and the other is then maybe sometimes just bringing a very specific focus and say, okay,
Yeah,
this is what we
yeah,
focus on. Let's see where we go with this, which can often bring up the other emotions because if you're if you're saying I'll focus on this one, say for example, use anger, fear might be the one that actually comes in first, so we might have to deal with that first to allow you to go, okay, how do I make it safe enough So there's not fear is not on the top. How to make it safe enough so that you could explore that part, or sadness. Oh, I'm going to be overwhelmed. How might we again create enough safety that you can allow sadness to emerge and be released? So that we'll come, I suppose, the ideal. I mean, the ideal. I don't know when I'll ever achieve it, but is that we're fluid in our emotions as much as possible in
Yeah.
being a human. Rather than fearful, be more fluid in them and accessible. They're accessible.
It's like a theme in what you're telling us with those patterns and paths, that we have a choice where we go, with emotions being fluid as well. And also the common what you were saying also brings us back to mindfulness, being aware. That's what you said you were working towards, being aware of, and yeah, I think, thank you so much for sharing. It's such a rich source of insight and knowledge here. I just I'm amazed how you can hold it all and articulate so eloquently. And I'm glad someone, I feel a bit lonely when I say there is no such thing as like embodiment. We are always embodied. We have so, so I will quote you now that it's not just my opinion. There is someone else who thinks this way. We can't be disembodied. We are in the body. We may be not aware of of what we are embodying. So,
I'm glad you
so
think like
thank
that
you.
too. I don't feel
Thank
I
you
don't
for
feel
that
quite as alone.
little. I take it as my personal gift from this conversation.
Well, I also too, because I love the idea that I'm not alone either. Because sometimes I do feel quite alone in this thought, but it just doesn't make sense to me to be disembodied. Because even as we're talking, it's not as if there's something that I sent you that is talking, and you sent me that is asking questions, like on a stick. You know, we're here
Yeah,
together, even on this virtual reality. Like I know I'm sitting on this chair. I know I've been using my hands, and I know I'm looking at you. I know my ears are hearing. So it's like, well, they're all connected. This is yeah. I'm in my body doing this. Um. So yeah, and I always think about that when I think about that, like when I hear about that, I go, well, if somebody's eating, where does the food go? Oh, interesting. I thought it went into your body. So
yeah, we are destined to be. We are born to be embodied, and that's what we are. I think it's a wonderful thing that we are doing, to be more aware of that on
Mm,
all sorts of levels.
mm,
So beneficial as well. And thank
mm,
you for highlighting and giving hope, really, uh, that, or reminding us of that hope that a lot can be done at any
mm.
stage of your life.
Yeah, yeah.
So I really enjoyed talking to you, and you mentioned quite a few of your offerings, but if you want to mention something else that we didn't talk about, invite people to where they can find you, what they can do with you, please do before we
Well,
say goodbye.
well, I have a website, which is embodiedbrain.ie, and on that I have listed out a lot of things I'm going to do this year. I do a Zoom. I think that's been one of the hilarious things about the pandemic is that I feel my life is hybrid. I feel like I'm a hybrid teacher. That I do a class on Zoom actually every Tuesday morning, and I was told in no uncertain terms that that class was to go on until the day I died, or that was it by my participants. There's no reason for you not doing it, pandemic or no pandemic. Just get on with it. So I said, all right, get on with it. So I do that, and then I'm starting allowed back to teach in person. So I have that ongoing group, but that's a big commitment. But I have a number of other workshops going on here in Ireland, live and in person, and they're listed out. And I'm going to do. I want to do a workshop on attention on its own, to name it. I'm really researching that now at the moment because I'm really obsessed with the notion that the techie billionaires are stealing our attention and they're not giving us payment for it. So I want to do a lot more on that. Um, and yeah, so a variety of things coming up on the website, but that's the best place to check it out is the website,
Great.
I
I'm glad that I visited it. So
think.
thank you,
Thank
thank you,
you.
thank you. And yeah, all the best. I'm sure I'll have more questions for you if I stay with my research.
Well, the
Goodbye.
very best to you, Alex, and absolutely congratulations on considering putting this into a master's. You know, I mean, that is, I will be so looking forward to reading it and hearing it about it at the end. I am in awe of you doing it. So I just want to say that to you. The best of luck to you with it.
Thank you.